Hi, everybody. Welcome to Overcoming Imposter Syndrome. This is a presentation for graduate studies, and I will go ahead and share my slide deck. And that way, y'all, let's see, we want, yeah, content only. That's fine. So I'm going to start the slideshow. And can everyone see this?
Yes.
Thumbs up? Okay, great. Yeah. So this is a graduate student wellness webinar. And a little bit about me before we get started. My name is Elena Wolf. I am currently the graduate assistant for counseling services. I am a master's candidate in the counseling master's program. I'm in my second year of three. And so my projected graduation date is May of 2027. My bachelor's was in English and Plan 2 from the University of Texas back in 2005. And since 2020, I have been working as a personal development coach. I also have a podcast that's very focused on personal development and kind of rewriting your life story. And I mentioned those sort of past experiences with coaching for two reasons. Partly because it is so relevant to the topic that we're talking about today. Imposter syndrome is one of the big kind of mindset things that I've helped people with. And also because if anyone on the call live wants to do any sort of like troubleshooting or mini coaching after we finish, after we've stopped recording, I'm available and open to that. So no pressure if that's not something that's of interest, but incentives for coming live next time, I guess. And so, just to give you kind of a broad overview of what we're here to talk about with imposter syndrome. So, we're going to go through some definitions and what it kind of looks and feels like in action, a little bit about where it comes from, or where at least researchers think it comes from, and then how you can kind of work to overcome it. So we'll give you some key takeaways and hopefully have time for a few questions at the end. And then again, if anyone wants to talk more specifically about, your specific situation, we'll turn the recording off and have time for that. So, what is imposter syndrome? It is a psychological phenomenon that's kind of characterized by persistent feelings of self-doubt, fear of inadequacy, and fear of being exposed as a fraud. So I think that last point, the fear of being exposed as a fraud, is really what differentiates imposter syndrome from simply being nervous or, a little bit uncertain. So some of the common symptoms for imposter syndrome are feeling, like an imposter, like you're a fake or a phony. There's a tendency to attribute to external factors like circumstances, luck. I fooled somebody very well and, kind of faked it. And, they don't know that mask that you're putting on in the picture. That's why you got success. That's why you got accepted to the program. That's, where your accolades are coming from, not your actual ability or not your actual efforts. There is often a doubting of your skill level or your own abilities. Like, I'm not really very good at this. I'm just somehow, fooling other people. And with that kind of comes that fear of being exposed. So you don't want to fail. You put a lot of performance pressure on yourself. You may be very sensitive to criticism, or you just kind of reject feedback. Even when it's positive, you're not able to take it in and accept that, oh, maybe I actually am competent at this. Maybe I actually am doing well. And again, often comparing yourself unfavorably to other people and feeling like you're not good enough. So even if you have external markers that might suggest you are, I got into graduate school, I'm making A's. My, feedback on D2L is all positive or mostly positive, maybe not all, but like mostly positive, but somehow I'm still not enough. I'm not doing enough. I'm, at risk of failing out or, whatever. So, um, some of the common patterns here are, we kind of just went over them, but it's persistent self-doubt. It's not just having a moment of self-doubt. It's not just, me needing to breathe deeply 3 times before we start and remind myself, we've done this before, we've taught live before, we've done webinars before, but actually it would be feeling like no matter what you do, anytime you're just I'm not enough. There's a fear of failure. There's a fear that I'm not going to perform this time. Or again, attributing the success to luck. I tricked you all. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be teaching this. I'm not qualified, but Darius is a dupe and I fooled him. Um, Again, you don't want to be exposed. You don't want people to see like how messy you really are or that you're not actually all that smart. You just try really hard. You don't want to take compliments or you don't even want to take objective feedback that's like, according to this rubric, you did this, this, and this. Well, there must be something wrong with the rubric. Somehow this isn't right. Or you're maybe just holding yourself to really unrealistic standards. You, um, you maybe wouldn't expect anyone else to perform at that level, but you're the exception. You have to be perfect every single time. So what are the consequences of this kind of mindset and thinking this way? Well, one of the big ones is that you are likely to avoid challenges. And so that might mean in a professional role that you don't go for that promotion or you don't offer to spearhead the project, even if you might be highly qualified, maybe even the best person on the team for it. So that's going to have both a personal or a personal professional cost in that you might not get the recognition you deserve, you might not get the opportunities you deserve because you won't advocate for yourself, but that also might cost your team or your company that they're not really getting the full benefit of what you could contribute. You might end up overworking or kind of on the other side of that procrastinating. So either doing absolutely too much preparation, you're staying up all night studying for a quiz, or you're not studying at all because you don't want to fail, and so you'd rather just like pretend it doesn't exist than try at all. And there are mental health consequences. Anxiety and depression are very common in people who are experiencing imposter syndrome, which, if you're kind of constantly living a lie and afraid of making any kind of mistake, afraid of being fully seen, afraid of being your authentic self, I mean, those are of course you're going to be anxious and of course you're going to feel depressed because you can't be yourself and you have this constant sort of fear state that no matter what you do there is a risk of potential negative consequence, whether that's social or professional. And you're also not going to be able to develop positive self-esteem. What gives us true self-esteem is feeling competent and like we have accomplished things, we've achieved things, we have skills we can draw on, we have qualities about ourselves that we can rely on. And so if you don't have like a solid self-perception or a sense of your own abilities, you can't really gain that sense of identity or self-pride or sense that you're making progress in your life. So where's your self-esteem supposed to come from if you can't access any of those things? And finally, there's going to be a fear of speaking up. So it might be at work, you don't feel like you have the authority to make critiques or suggestions of the processes or maybe how something's being done. You don't want to contribute. You're worried about having a wrong opinion or a bad idea. And, gosh, if I express a bad idea, they're going to realize that I don't belong here. And, da 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 da, what's going to happen? I'm going to get fired. I'm going to get something taken away. I'm going to be shunned. I'm going to be ridiculed. All these, terrible consequences. And that might also lead to, aside from not sharing ideas that could be really valuable with your team, you might also like leave yourself with a skill gap where there's a correctable problem where you could get extra training or get some extra support to really learn that process and do it well. But if you're not willing to admit that I don't have it on lock yet, you're not going to ask for the help you need. So is imposter syndrome really a thing. It's not currently recognized as a mental health disorder, so you're not going to find it like in the DSM or the International Classification of Diseases, but it is a recognized and named phenomenon. So it's been in counseling and psychological research literature since the late 1970s. I think 1978 was the year the first article that sort of proposed it as a concept was published. And it's viewed as an emergent of situation, beliefs, and mindset. And imposter syndrome is estimated to affect 70 to 80% of people at least once in their lifetime. So this is a pretty common thing, and it's not necessarily something that's chronic. It might be sort of a learning curve that once you've kind of address some of your underlying beliefs, you don't have to struggle with it again. It might be something that kind of comes and goes, depending on your situation. So, what are some of the causes of it? And there are both personal and systemic sort of underlying factors. On the personal level, we have our self concept, and that is going to be beliefs about our abilities, our competency, what our role in the world is. And a lot of those get seeded when we are children in our family of origin. So if we're in a family where we feel like we have to be absolutely perfect all the time, or we're at risk of being criticized, that's maybe going to affect our self concept. It tells us that if I'm not perfect, I'm not lovable. If I'm not perfect, I'm going to be shamed and criticized and rejected. It might also affect our like what we perceive as our social roles. The original paper on they didn't call it imposter syndrome, they called it the imposter phenomenon, focused on women, particularly high achieving women. And it posited that a lot of the origin of it was social and cultural factors that said women shouldn't be intelligent and successful, and that if they are, they're not very good at being women. And so that has sort of been, I don't know, not disproved in the sense that that's not a thing, but disproved in the sense that that's not the only population that can get affected by imposter syndrome or the only reason for it. But, that's one way that maybe our social conditioning will put us in conflict with being able to accurately see and measure our abilities and our competencies. We might have stories that we tell about ourselves. What's our inner story that I'm not enough, that I'm inadequate, something like that. And we might have an intense fear of judgment. We might constantly compare ourselves with other people. We might have what's considered a fixed mindset is where you think like growth is not really a thing. You either have the qualities or you don't, as opposed to looking at growth as a combination of experience and skill and deliberate learning. And if you're not receptive to feedback, that means you can have all of the evidence in the world. I've got a PhD, I have this amazing job, I am, talking at international conferences. But if I don't allow that to be meaningful, if I don't allow that to be evidence of my own competency and skill and ability, then I'm rejecting it. It's meaningless. I don't have those things. Systemic reasons might be either feeling like an outsider to an organization or a role, and that's maybe more your perception of it, or actually experiencing things like microaggressions and exclusions that are telling you because of how you were treated by the other people around you or the system that you're part of, that you don't really belong, that you're an outsider. You might also have, a family template where um, women aren't supposed to work, or men are only supposed to be successful in this type of role. And maybe you're an amazing musician, but you're supposed to be in a medical role or something like that. And so um, it can it can kind of come from that sort of external system that you're in within your family. And how is the environment that you're in responsive to mistakes? Do they make mistakes normal or do they make them punishable? Do they make mistakes learning opportunities or do they make them, judgments about worth and value? And finally, is your environment very competitive or is it collaborative? And one of the main drivers of imposter syndrome in a workplace actually is a very competitive workplace where people aren't able to make mistakes because, or they feel like they're not able to make mistakes safely because that's going to lose them status with other people or someone's going to try to take their place. But imposter syndrome can also be triggered by circumstances. So, times of transition and personal expansion, like graduating or starting a new academic program, getting a new job, getting a promotion, those are often times when we start to feel like, oh, I don't really have what it takes, which kind of makes sense. Like you're stepping into new responsibilities or a new set of tasks and a new environment, whether that's a new city, whether it's a new job, you don't know what to do yet. You haven't yet experienced yourself doing the thing. So, th- it's that conflict between what do I think I'm capable of based on what I have experienced myself doing and what I am being asked to do by this situation. Um, others might be having a new supervisor come in or having recently, made a mistake, had a failure with a project that sort of knocked your confidence back. And so now you have this really big memory of a failure rather than previous successes. So getting a little deeper into some of the underlying beliefs with imposter syndrome, it might be about perfectionism. Unless you were absolutely perfect, then you could have done better and it wasn't enough. It was a failure if it wasn't perfect. It might be a belief that if you still have more to learn about something, then you're not really an expert. You're not really an authority because you don't know everything. It might be the belief that if you're naturally good at something, you're intelligent, you're competent, you have this ability, then you're going to be able to achieve mastery very quickly, maybe even instantly, like your first try. And so if you have to practice, if you need extra learning, if you need extra time, then you must not be very good at it. And maybe you're not even very smart. Another underlying belief might be that if you didn't get there on your own, like if you had to ask for help, if you needed mentoring, if you needed training, then it doesn't really count. You didn't earn it. And finally, uh, the sense that if you are not working hardest and doing absolutely everything and getting everything right with all of the different roles that you play and all the different parts of your life, then you're not enough. You're a failure or you're a fraud. So, those are some of the sort of cognitive distortions that are happening when somebody's experiencing or prone to imposter syndrome. And they kind of create two different problems. One of them is a self-confidence problem, and the other is a self-concept problem. And these two problems are going to have slightly different pathways for resolution. Uh, Mostly, I'm going to focus on the self-confidence problem because that's more of how you're thinking about it, how you're conceptualizing the problem. Self-concept issues might be something that you actually need professional help, going to therapy to resolve because they tend to be older, deeper, and less about simply reframing and more about like really updating your sense of yourself and your stories. And that can be a complicated process. So it's certainly possible to update our self-concept, and I'm not even going to say that you necessarily have to go to therapy to do it. I think there's plenty of people that are able to introspect and review the sort of stories that they're telling about themselves and what kind of audit their belief system to update things that are genuinely untrue. But um, it's a more complicated process. So we'll talk more about the self-confidence aspect. because self-confidence is really kind of based on embodiment, kind of an embodied knowing of your competency. And you can get to that with using relevant experiences and sort of recalculating how you're evaluating the evidence. You can reframe your expectations for performance, and you can cultivate a growth mindset. So those are all actions that you can take today and kind of take away from this webinar and start applying. So if you're experiencing, imposter syndrome and feeling like you're not enough, try these first. And if they're not working, or you're realizing, oh, there's some underlying, you know, beliefs that are stuck, that's maybe when you say, okay, should I go see a professional to help with my self-concept? So the first thing I want to talk about is cultivating a growth mindset. And I already kind of covered a little bit about what a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset is. Essentially, do you believe that you can learn and change and grow, or do you think that the qualities that make you successful are innate and you have them or you don't? The reason a growth mindset is so powerful is because it gives you more control over like the long-term outcome of your life and the things you're trying to accomplish. Because regardless of any specific success or failure, you can always choose to try again. You can always choose to stay engaged with the process and to keep going, to keep learning, to ask for support, to do, whatever you need to do to enhance your skill. So, in contrast, somebody with a fixed mindset is going to give up when they hit a failure, or they're going to live in anxiety of being exposed as a fraud, which is just, it's not a comfortable way to live. You're not feeling the sense of confidence and competency, and you're not able to enjoy the growth that you're experiencing and the achievements that you're making because you don't believe it's real, or you're afraid that it's going to get taken away from you. So, one of the key things I find with cultivating a growth mindset is simply to expect that you're going to have mistakes along the way. You're going to have failures and setbacks. And if you are expecting them, when they happen, you're not going to get thrown off or have this sense that, oh, something's wrong because I made a mistake or I had this setback. You're going to be able to take it as a learning moment. And so if you can make failure a learning event, your belief system kind of becomes either I win or I learn. So either way, I come out ahead. In the sense of confidence, then we come to confidence because we embody the skills. We embody the capacity to do the thing. That's what makes us feel confident. So the fake it till you make it advice is kind of basically like, okay, if you don't feel confident, go try it, go see yourself doing it, and from that, gain confidence. But what can you do if you haven't tried the thing and you're trying to boost your confidence? Well, you can look at past experiences that might be analogous or translate to the present moment. Like, have I given this specific webinar on imposter syndrome before? No. But what's an analogous experience? Okay, I have talked about um, you know, personality type at a conference. I've done that live. So that's a skill that I have. I can embody that. Um, I've turned in research papers. I know that I can, find reliable resources and get a good sense of what everyone agrees on with a topic and then present that information cogently. So maybe I haven't done this specific thing, but I have analogous experiences that give me skills that I can rely on for parts of it. And that's going to kind of lower that sense of uncertainty and non-skilledness that leads to anxiety and kind of fear of failure. So, another way that we can approach it is to not take shortcuts, to do the work, to actually read all of the things that we're assigned, to sort of trust the process of um, the training that we're being presented with to actually transform us, to be open to that process and let it in, and you know, do the thing that we are trying to do as a process. Um, So becoming process oriented rather than outcome driven says that you are looking for the experience, like the thing itself is worth doing, not only worth doing if you get it right or only worth doing if you do it perfectly. And so that kind of detaches us from our performance expectations and lets us lead with the skills that we have and bring our strengths to bear on the situation rather than being inhibited by our fear of failure. So that kind of goes back to mindset. If you focus on the things that you can control, you're going to be less afraid of failure. If you say, I'm going to prepare as best I can, and I'm going to show up, and I'm going to try my best, I can control all of those variables. And if I'm basing my self judgment or my judgment of my performance on those, then it doesn't matter if my performance is perfect or not, because I did the things I could control, and I can trust that I'm able to do that again. So finally, if we're looking at kind of assessing the evidence more objectively, understanding that humans have a negativity bias. So our brain, in an attempt to protect us from failure, rejection, all of those unpleasant feelings, will over focus on the negative experiences to try to avoid them happening again. And that also can blind us to the times that we did it well. Like it doesn't matter that I did it 10 times right. The one time I did it wrong is the time that counts. No, the 10 times you did it right are the times that counts. The one time just makes you human. And one kind of tip for this is if you can quantify your performance, like literally define how success is going to be measured, then you can compare yourself to that and find the gap. What am I not able to do that would make me successful? And once you know that, it's very actionable information. So um, that will help kind of, again, going back to that embodiment piece, like, oh, well, now I know I just need to learn how to do X, Y, or Z. You go gain that skill, and then you actually hit all of those criteria for, oh, this is what success means. I hit those criteria, I self-defined it, therefore I must be successful. A couple things to remember is that we tend to be dismissive of what is easy for us. So we don't always recognize when we have a skill that is maybe rare or hard for other people because it's easy for us. We do it all the time. We don't think about it as maybe being something that another person might struggle with. One really easy example for me is public speaking. It's actually apparently of a very common top three fear for most people. I am not intimidated by public speaking. I guess I like to be heard. So for me, like this might look easy or this might feel easy because it is kind of easy for me, but I don't want to be dismissive of how another person is rating that. Like if they're seeing that as, wow, that's a really skillful thing, or that's a capacity that I don't have, who am I to say that they're wrong and I'm right just because it's something that comes pretty naturally for me? So when we're calibrating our own performance or assessing, our own values, we also want to take into account how other people tend to rate things. And remember that nobody is going to see your messy process. They see the final product. And if you're comparing their final product to your messy beginning, that's an unfair comparison. But also, if you're expecting judgment, just remember that they're not going to be judging you on the messy performance along the way that got you the skills. They're going to be judging you kind of on the final thing. What's the public presentation, not the vision that you had or the worst moment that you had along the learning curve. And a challenge is by definition beyond our current capacity. So if we're actually growing, we are challenging ourselves to do something that we don't know how to do. But that's how we move our life forward. That's how we achieve great things, is by being willing to stand in that kind of uncertainty and that place of not having the embodied knowledge, but being willing to try anyway. So, um, the takeaways that I want you to have from this session is that imposter syndrome comes from a combination of limiting beliefs, distorted self-concept, and environmental pressures. But you can recalibrate your self assessments by incorporating a kind of metacognitive reflection. That's what we've been doing this whole time, looking at what beliefs are underlying this. What story am I telling myself about this situation or my performance? Getting feedback from someone that you trust, whether that's a friend that you really believe is going to be honest with you. They're not going to avoid telling you the hard things, but also they're not going to pump you up, undeservedly. So that might be someone you can get feedback from, or maybe a supervisor or an academic advisor or something like that. And just, trust that they're actually going to give you feedback that's helpful for your growth. It's not competitive feedback, and it's not trying to set you up for failure by telling you, oh, you have all these great skills and abilities that you don't really have. You have to, again, trust the person that you're talking to be honest with you. And finally, employing a growth mindset, because that's going to help manage emotional reactions. So if we normalize our mistakes, if we are able to believe failures are simply learning moments that lead to growth, if we choose to try again, if we choose to keep learning, then we're able to kind of maintain emotional equilibrium rather than being sent off in a sort of negative self-talk spiral by making a mistake, finding something hard, having a moment of failure or challenge. So, um, let's see. Yeah. Any questions? I realize we're right at the half hour, but
Thank you so much, Elena, for that. I
yeah.
did have one question. I know you mentioned two different types of beliefs. One of them was like the systemic kind. Now,
Hmm.
do you? But I'm, as an African American man, male, that's something that
Yeah.
I've run into several times. Just that kind of the microaggressions and that kind of thing. So, do
Hmm.
you handle? Would you say you handle those kinds of issues with imposter syndrome differently than the other kind? I can't remember what was the first kind that you mentioned.
Yeah, so I was sort of trying to differentiate between personal sort of beliefs and then actual structural situations. And yes, because I think that imposter syndrome is, if it's purely about our self-perception, that's kind of a different underlying problem than if we are in a situation where we're actively sort of being told you don't belong. So if you're
Mhm.
feeling anxious because, you're not able to accept, oh, well, I got hired for this position and am hitting all of my performance marks, therefore I must be doing well. I can't accept that. That's really different from if you're in a situation where you kind of have messaging telling you, you don't belong, you're not enough, um, you're doing something wrong, maybe even just by being here. So it's not that the systemic component isn't part of imposter syndrome, but it is sort of a different etiology for why it's happening.
Mhm. Awesome. Well, I guess that's it. Thank you so much for your time today, Elena. I appreciate
Yeah.
you for coming and chatting with us.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope that everybody that was here or watching this later got something valuable from the presentation.
I really did. I really enjoyed it. So thank you. I appreciate it.
As did
Great,
I.
thank you.
As did I. Very relatable. Great job. I guess this is sort of a follow-up because we actually in the Sahi program just did a whole discussion on mental health and everything.
Hmm.
Um, I guess really, how could this sort of resource and this sort of webinar potentially be more available within classes? Because I think this would have been a great thing for a lot of graduate students to have and to hear, and maybe a resource that could be put onto D2L, could be incorporated into some modules, I think. So I just was curious, like how I guess I want to help promote this because I think this was really cool and a really good thing to have a webinar sort of specifically for graduate students. And I think I could find it being very helpful for a lot of future students as well. So I want to try and help spread these sort of things. So, whatever I can do to help sort of promote this and get more people involved and stuff like this, I would love to help out.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for saying that, Brandon. I will absolutely. So we've been doing these webinars on the first Friday of every month, starting in October. We're going to have another one in December, on December 5th. And then in the spring, we're going to do another week or like monthly webinar series as well. So I will absolutely make sure to provide you with all of the resources and the recruitment. But we are also, if I'm not mistaken, the Health and Wellness Hub, they're taking all of these recorded videos and placing them on their website. So you should be able to find all of the recordings. So if you needed to direct any of the students to the Health and Wellness website, and I will actually I will get the web link for that after this meeting, and that way I can send that to you directly as well.
Perfect. I would love to forward that along to I touch base with the director for the Sahi program pretty often. So like I would love to get her in contact with that. That way she can use that to promote all these really cool things and good webinars that y'all are hosting for graduate students. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brandon. And thank you, Elena. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my
And
pleasure.
we look forward to working with you again.
Same.
Cheers.